Hello, everyone. Thank you. Music is a very ubiquitous phenomenon. We make music and we listen to music in our everyday lives. It brings us into the right mood, it bonds us to other people, and it also creates shared experiences. But how does that work? Why does music create emotions in us? Well, I'm a music researcher, and I conduct experiments in order to find out how music influences our emotions. Right now, I would like to do an experiment with you. So, if you agree, I'm going to play you two excerpts. The first one goes like this. So now, everyone who thinks that this sounded sad, please raise your hand. Okay, no one here. Who would say that this one sounded happy? Please raise your hand. Okay. Now let's go to the next one. And who would say that this one was happy? Okay, again, no hands. And who would say that this one was sad? Okay. So I see a lot of hands. So maybe we can agree on that the first one was a happy excerpt and maybe also made you feel happy a little bit. And the second one was a sad excerpt and made you feel a little sad. However, maybe not everyone raised their hand. So there's some similarities in your feelings. However, not everyone may have agreed on that. So there might have been also some differences. So where does it come from? Why does music create emotions in us? I brought you here now 4 different explanations. The first one says that this is based on learned associations. So all of you are probably from Belgium. You've been raised in the Western European world in a similar cultural environment, and you may have just learned to associate the musical patterns I just presented to you with emotional contexts that made the music emotional. So for example, excerpt 1 may have used features that have been used in a happy movie, for example, in a scene where people laugh and people smile. And then you just learn to associate these features with happiness. And excerpt 2 could have been associated with sad contexts, which made this music sound sad. There's another explanation which is based on learning, which was termed musical expectations. We think that in our everyday experience of music, we acquire statistical knowledge about the statistical properties of musical structures. We actually learn musical patterns, musical styles. So for example, you may have experienced that once you were in your car and you turned on the radio and you heard a song that you've never heard before. However, you may have been still able to sing along with that song. That's because you've got musical knowledge about the probabilities of musical patterns, your knowledge about the musical syntax. And this knowledge may create expectations. And these expectations may turn into emotions. So for example, you may anticipate that something in the music will come which you like a lot, and this will create pleasure. There could be also tension, because you know that something in the music is about to come, but you don't know when and what is going to happen. And there may be also surprise. When we conducted a study some years ago, we presented our participants a piece that had this and other segments in it, and this particular musical segment sounded like this. And in the context of that piece, our participants told us that this is very unexpected to them. It was computationally difficult to predict from the musical structure, and we could also measure that this segment and also the other segments that were surprising to our participants induced physiologically and subjectively arousal in our participants. The third explanation says that music induces emotions because of expressive emotional movement. Let's look at happiness and sadness again. Of course, when we're happy and we're sad, there's a subjective feeling of happiness and sadness associated with these emotions. However, there are also particular behaviors that go along with that, and they may be the reason why we experience happiness and sadness. When we are happy, we tend to become active, and we're approaching things, and we're moving in a fast way. However, when we're sad, we become slow, we stop our current behavior, we're frustrated because we didn't reach a certain goal. And along with these movements, there are also expressions. And these expressions of emotions that can be sometimes hurt. I brought you a recording of a person now who's in a happy state.
Have fun. Again.
All right.
Even from the sound of footsteps, that's something we found out in a study, people can recognize the emotional expression or the emotional state a person is in. Now let's listen to someone who's in a sad mood.
Have fun. Again.
All right.
So if we compare the two expressions now, the happy expressions were louder, faster, and higher in pitch. Now let's listen to the happy music again. And now to the sad music again. So also the happy music was louder, higher, and faster, higher in pitch and faster. So we think music may be emotional because it sounds like someone is moving in an emotional way. And these emotional expressions can be also, to some extent, be universal. In a study that some colleagues of mine conducted, they asked people to control certain acoustical parameters of music, those that I just mentioned, and they asked them to express happiness and sadness. And what they observed that people use very similar settings in two very different isolated cultures without any contact with each other. The same goes for emotion recognition. So in another study that some colleagues conducted, they observed that people also from two very distinct and isolated cultures were able to recognize happiness and sadness in happy Western and sad Western music. But how does recognizing an emotion become to feeling an emotion for yourself? We think that this is realized through a process that is similar to empathy. So for example, if we think of excerpt 1 that may have made you feel happy, you may have empathized with that person you imagined that was expressing happiness. In order to test all these ideas of the universalness of emotion induction, we conducted an experiment some years ago at McGill University and established a collaboration with an ethnomusicologist. She went to the northern Congo rainforest and visited a population of Congolese pygmies that lived there without electricity, without access to electronic media, and that were very unfamiliar with Western music. They basically have never heard it before. We then presented to those participants and also to Canadians Western music. When we then categorized it into Western positive music and Western negative music, so that's the Western opinion about music, we saw that the responses to these two types of music were very different for the two groups. So there was no universal emotion induction for valence, so for positivity or negativity. However, when we grouped our music with respect to its arousing potential, so also the Western opinion again, we could see that in both groups, arousing music compared with calming music induced subjective and physiological arousal. So the sympathetic nervous system, our participants in both groups, became active. And the arousing music, again, was louder, faster, and higher in pitch. However, there could be also a fourth explanation of these findings, which does not relate to expressive movement. It could be also that music is also just activating sound that has a very direct influence on our sympathetic nervous system, that creates attention or orientation and subjective and physiological arousal. This could be similar to your alarm clock in the morning that wakes you up. Now let me conclude and summarize why music creates emotions in us. I just presented you 4 different explanations. The first one says that this is based on learned associations. The second one says that this is because of your knowledge about musical structures that builds up musical expectations. The third one says that this is due to expressive movements. And the fourth one says that this is due to activating sounds. The top two mechanisms are based on learning and may explain why our emotions, that can be sometimes very rich when we listen to music, can be very individual and different. However, the bottom two mechanisms and explanations I just presented to you may be based on more universal response patterns and help to explain why our responses are sometimes very similar and maybe bonding us together and creating shared experiences. Thank you.